The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to CPSC's sponsored webinar, Leading a Data-Driven Fire Department. Today's presenter is Dr. Lori Moore-Merrell, the President and CEO of International Public Safety Data Institute. Lori began this role after serving 26 years as a senior executive in the International Association of Firefighters and is considered an expert in executive leadership, emergency response system evaluation, public safety resource deployment, community risk assessment, data collection and analysis, strategic planning, costs and benefits analysis, advocacy, consensus building, policy development and implementation, and generational differences in the workplace. At the end of the webinar, please contact Dr. Moore-Merrell directly for additional information and be sure to visit their booth at the 2020 Excellence Conference, March 3rd through 6th at the Caribe Royale Hotel and Convention Center in Orlando, Florida. Thank you for attending. Now I'll let Dr. Lori Moore-Merrell begin the webinar.
Thank you very much, Cindy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. We're very excited that you could join us today. I do have a guest speaker who will be joining us shortly, but we'll go ahead and get started with some of the information for the webinar. So today I am going to introduce you to the International Public Safety Data Institute. I'm going to wait for a slide to move here. There we go. So the new Data Institute has been around now just about a year. And we stood up this nonprofit that is a collaborative of several fire service organizations last July. And the mission of this new Data Institute is to enhance public safety through data science. And so everything that we do involves data of some description. So the IPSDI, or as we refer to it now, as the Data Institute. So anytime you hear that kind of language, you'll know that it's us. We do have the intention to be the leading research, development, and training organization focused on data science and providing analytical tools back to the public safety sector. Those analytical tools do leverage as much as possible technology to do data capture so that we are not increasing the burden of data entry on firefighters. We do want to make sure that we can give you live dashboards back to provide actionable insights for your operations in your departments. And so hence the name of the webinar, Driving or a Data-Driven Fire Department. Our partners within the Institute are those listed on the screen. And so as you can see, this is the same group that perhaps you're familiar with the NIST studies, the high-rise and residential studies that were done some years ago. It's the same group of partners. In fact, it's the same researchers who have now stood up this new Data Institute. So our partners, including the IFC, the IAFF, the Metropolitan Fire Chiefs, as well as UL, NIST, CFAI Risk, University of Texas, and Urban Institute. And of course, our lead funder, which is the Assistance of Firefighters Grants, from Homeland Security and FEMA. So I want to talk to you just a little bit about core values of the department, because this is really where we start to talk more about where the data reside and how you're going to use them. So as we look at the core values of the fire department, these values have really driven our research for about 15 years. Everything that we look at in the data arena as well, we want to make sure we're assessing preparedness, the prevention, public education, and of course emergency response, which we'll focus on more today. But all of these things really do make up as well the new umbrella that we know as community risk reduction. So if you were to focus on that, you can see that every aspect of data that we'll be going through today in the emergency response arena does focus again back on risk. It focuses on areas that you can communicate, whether it's preparedness or prevention or public education. Always with the criteria of making sure that our responders as well as the community, we look at three criteria: effective, efficient, and safe. So everything we do, every measure that we take, we always keep those three criteria in mind. And they become really the benchmarks for all that we do. So let's talk just a moment about operational performance measures. So with the performance measures that perhaps you've heard of before, and I've put a picture here of the data summit that was done actually back in 2011. So some of you may have even been present for that, or you've read this report. If you haven't, it is available on our website. So the proceedings from the data summit really laid the groundwork from the outgrowths of the NIST studies to where we are today with some of our data tools that we have developed. And so this Fire Data Summit, as I said, was an outgrowth of where we knew we had a lack of operational information to really talk about what do firefighters and paramedics do when they show up. So to date, we only have data that tells us maybe your response times, right? And then we can see fire spread. And that's usually not well done, right? So we don't have a lot of quality data. We have no data on what happens between those two times. What's your time to intervention? What's your time at patient? What is your time of water on fire? Your first, primary search complete? Things like that. So what are firefighters doing on the scene? And that's where we need that information to show value, to show where we need, appropriate crew sizes, where we need effective response forces. And so part of that has to do with looking at a department's response availability, knowing where your resources are available, or do you have a lot of situations where you're sending a second due unit as a first due unit because the original first due is so busy, they're already engaged, right? And your call volume is high in that jurisdiction. So things like that about your availability. Then we want to make sure that we can talk about capability. That, what do you do when you show up? Can you arrive? Can you arrive with the right training to have that engagement on scene to mitigate whatever the incident is? And then, of course, our operational performance. And there's that word again, effectiveness. So again, efficient, safe, effective. We want to make sure that we maintain those criteria in our operational performance as well. So to do that, we often talk about benchmarking, and certainly if you're affiliated in any way with the accreditation process, you know the word benchmarking, and you know how to set up your performance metrics. So some of the things that we will discuss and that you'll see in a lot of our data tools, we talk about improving or optimizing your operation. We are going to talk about benchmarks, and we'll show you, particularly in the NFORS system that you're going to see. In fact, on every incident, you can establish benchmarks and be able to measure and see how you perform literally on every incident. And then looking at some comparative metrics as well and promoting the best practices as we gather more and more data, not just on your system, but on other systems with like risk. So why do we need to establish these operational performance measures? And I will tell you that if there are any metro departments on the webinar with us, if you represent a metro department, you may or may not know that the Metropolitan Fire Chiefs have actually released a list of performance metrics that they believe are the baseline for every metro department. The baseline measures that you should be, on which you should be gathering data and issuing reports so that you know more about your operations and how well you're matching resources to risk. So looking at performance metrics, determining what's that baseline performance you have today on several different data points, establishing goals, of course, and then seeing where those gaps are. And that's really the accreditation process, isn't it? It's looking at always improving that quality improvement plan that you have going forward. So baseline, where are your goals, where are the gaps, and how do we move forward to make those changes to meet our benchmarks? So the first data tool that I want to go through with you today is called FireCARES. Some of you may have seen FireCARES before. We're going to keep this relatively brief. I want you to go and check out your FireCARES page when we're done, because every fire department has a FireCARES page. But the last half of this seminar is really going to focus on the NFORS tool, and that's where I want you to see all of the new opportunities that you have for your department as well. So in FireCARES, as you well know, if you've seen the system before, it stands for Community Assessment Response Evaluation System. FireCARES is a big data system where we have layered many layers of national data sets on each other, and then we've used some algorithms to mine that data to be able to tell your story. So every fire department in the country, volunteer, career, all of them, have a FireCARES page. It is your page to use. We've built in a lot of assets there for you, and we're going to have a live look at FireCARES in just a moment. But we do look at 3 different scores. Your community risk assessment is there for fire. We are doing final testing on EMS risk assessment and loading those EMS heat maps now. I'll tell you more about that in a moment. And then looking at your historic performance capabilities. How well is the department deploying resources then to match your risk? And looking at better understanding your comparison with other departments with like risk. So let me just, I'm going to escape out of the slide, so bear with me for just a moment and bring up FireCARES Live. So you all should be able to see the FireCARES system. So let's just have a look. I'm going to show you Boston because they've done a great job at adding enough resources to really show you the art of the possible. So you can go in and enter your department name. Any department with that name anywhere in its overall name will come up. And then as you see, you're going to be able to have a look at your jurisdiction. Every department, as I said, has its own page with your own assets that have been added. And so as we look at the Boston department, you can see that they have their outline. Now that's one of the things I want you to check. When you pull up your page, check your border of your community. You can see that this map will move around. So make sure that we have your border accurate because it's within that jurisdictional border that we measure your risk. That risk assessment for fire and EMS, I'm only going to show you fire today, is just below the map. So you can see that Boston is a high-risk community for fire, a lower risk for fire spread overall, and a medium risk for death and injury. So those are the 3 criteria that we assess. We have geocoded more than 15 years of NFORS data because that's all we had to work with at the beginning. And so that is what we have used to help layer in then your fires within your data set. So I'll show you that heat map in just a moment, but I want to show you the second score. So over on your right, you'll see the performance score for the department. One of the cool features here is that I can actually look at this by hazard level. So if I wanted just to look at Boston's low hazard environment, that is going to be by NFPA definition, your single family, 2-story, 2,000 square foot, what we used to call the NFPA 1710 type structure, right? When it first, the standard was first released. But take a look at what happened to their fire risk. They went to a medium risk for fire, a high risk of fire spread, and if you know anything about Boston, you know how their single family dwellings are very close in proximity, and then a medium risk for death and injury. I can do the same thing. Oh, and look at their performance score, and I'll come back to that in a second. But I can do the same thing for their high-risk structures. Take a look. High risk for fire, low spread, but high death and injury. So that's where we're getting into that lower frequency but higher consequence type event. So look at their score. Again, difference. So this gauge gives you your comparison to other departments with similar risk and how well you deploy resources, right, in your jurisdiction. So they have a 16. Now, this gauge, or that number is like a time differential, okay? It's sort of like a golf score. You want it to be low, right? So we want it to, it's a time differential comparing them to their best self. And so if that was a 0, right, they would be meeting all of the performance criteria, for example, in 1710. If I go back to their low, you're going to see that go up. So they don't perform or deploy as well in that low hazard environment as they do for a high-rise structure, for example. And so we can see some of their performance in there as well. So looking at the third score is the safe grade, and that safe grade is here, and that's going to tell you how well those 2 scores match. So given that they're a high-risk environment, given that this is their deployment capability, and they're falling in what we call that medium quartile of departments with like risk, but their safe grades are good. So even given that high risk, they're deploying well enough that they're getting this good safe grade on how well they deploy resources to match their risk. So that's how you read your FireCARES page. Now let me show you some of the other things that you can do. So if we scroll in just a little bit into the page, you're going to see that we can get a little better information. Now, over on your right, there's a stack of paper. I'm just going to turn off that boundary and turn on your parcels. And so we're going to scroll in a little more. You're going to see some other things appear. You know, first is there's some red dotted lines. That's first due areas. That's something you can add to the system. We're going to scroll a little more, and you'll start to see building footprints to load. We're also going to see a hydrant layer, and there's your building footprints. And you'll see that there's some color coding that's taking place. So the green is your low hazard environment. The peach color is more of a medium, and then the pink color that you're seeing are high hazard structures. So we have loaded parcels for every community in the country. We update that every 6 months. And you can click on any of these parcels and get more information. So if you, even your inspectors can use this. If you wanted to overlay a layer of your inspections, you could do that. So we work with you to load any other geographic data sets that you would want to visualize in your page. And so this page is yours. It's yours to add, to display. You can use it in presentations. You can print from it. So there's all kinds of assets that are here for you. I'm going to turn on the heat map so you can see how the fires are displayed. So see the difference where we've had a lot of fire in some of these parcels, some of these structures through Boston. So we have your historic fire data here as well. So I'll just turn off the parcel layer, and you can see then the fire heat map. Now, what else has happened is that just below that map, I've got a grid now that I can search for time, so various years. If you want to see what's happened in recent years, then you can have just those that data appear in the map. So that's how you would use some of that. Now, I'm going to turn off that heat map and show you one of the other features. Before I do that, though, I want to take you to your station. So let's just scroll down. You see a lot of the data's there. All of your stations will be loaded. So let's just have a look at one of Boston's stations. So we'll pick engine 4, ladder 24. You'll see their first due area. If we have that layer for you, if you want to send that, we'll load it for you. Just below each of these, you're going to see a station table. We need to know what rides out of that station. And so this is the only place you'd be able to do some data entry in FireCARES. We want you to tell us what rides there and how it is stacked, because we would need this data to use what I'm about to show you back in the main map. So load your station tables. We will load them for you if you want to send us a list of stations and what apparatus rides out of each station. We do want to know if it's an ALS capable unit, because we are preparing some new EMS assets that will be loaded in the system. So your station tables are below your map, but let's just turn on the service area and have a look at what you can do in the station layer. So as you will see, we just ran some GIS there. So I've got a 4-minute, a 6-minute, and an 8-minute capability from that station. So you can see where you can respond from that station and where your assets begin to show some good overlap. So you want to see this overlap with other stations at that 8-minute criteria, because that's where we start talking about effective response forces being able to assemble that full alarm assignment within 8 minutes, right? So this is where we can begin to assess some of that information. Let's go back to Boston's main page, because I want to show you what I was talking about with those station tables. So let's have a look. In the little stack of paper here, you can turn on an effective response force. So we'll be able to see, and I'm just going to scroll up so you can see it. You can see the number of parcels covered. So how many low hazard parcels do they have? And can they get 15 firefighters there in less than 8 minutes, assembled there for an effective response force? You can also look at it as a percentage of parcel coverage. So low hazard parcels, remember we have all your parcels, they've been hazard coded, hazard level coded. And so How do we know this? Well, those station tables that I told you needed to complete at the station level, then that helps us to show and to run your capability for doing your effective response force coverage capability right in FireCARES. So this is for them, 83% coverage on their medium hazards. That's your strip malls, your 3-story garden apartments, your more smaller schools, things like that, and assembling 27 firefighters in less than 8 minutes. Then also looking at their high hazard. So they've got an 80% coverage capability there, getting 38 firefighters in less than 10 minutes. So this you can do, but you must populate those station tables because we need those numbers to be able to run the algorithm so that you can see your capability in FireCARES. So that's a little bit of a demo. There's so many other things I could show you, but in the interest of time, I'm going to take us back to the slides now. So give us just a second for the slides to come back up. There we go. And all right, so to take you forward, we want to talk more about telling a complete story, right? So you saw what the capability of FireCARES is, and we want you to use it. It was developed, as I said, by the fire service for the fire service. So we really want you to get in, add data layers to your FireCARES page. Just go to the About. You can find all kinds of questions, frequently asked questions, and you can connect with us directly, and we'll load your data assets so that you can use your FireCARES page more effectively. So let's move on now to talk more, because I want to lead us in now to the National Fire Operations Reporting System. So we want to talk now about telling your story, and we use this terminology a lot when we talk about departments, because it really is important for chiefs and for others to be able to talk about the value, what you do, what you deliver to the community, whether it's in a budget time or some other circumstance. So we want to leverage your data that is available to show that you have adequate resources for those things like prevention, public education, even training we could add there, and emergency response. So with that, we want to make sure you can tell a more complete story. Anticipate the questions that your decision makers want to know, right? Where do your data reside? How can we get them together and leverage them better to talk about your capability, your activity, your performance, and certainly your system resilience, which is very important. When you have resources deployed, how many move-ups do you have to do, right, to maintain that system resilience and your capability to respond? So with that, introducing to you NFORS. I hope you've all seen NFORS, and certainly in the social media about our exposure tracker, which we're going to talk to you about briefly at the end. But looking at the National Fire Operations Reporting System, it is a fire service analytical system with live dashboards, just like we promised, from the Data Institute. And so all of the things that we can do with NFORS, looking at all of the things that are highlighted there for you, not only efficient or assurance of adequate resources, but minimizing those negative outcomes in firefighter injury and death, civilian injury and death, and property loss. And that's really our goal with the fire service, right? All of us want to minimize those negative outcomes in those three arenas. So the NFORS dashboards, what we do is connect live to your CAD system. We can also supplement by connecting to your RMS system so that you have the real-time data analytics. You can see them. Everything is geocoded when it comes in. You get to customize and design your dashboards like you want them. You can build as many dashboards as you want. You can have one for EMS, one for hazmat, one for every battalion. You can build as many as you need for your analytics. And so it does provide you these real-time analytics. You could even have dashboards parsed out by your city council districts to show what happens in each of their districts, for example. It is searchable, it's linked, everything is filterable right in the dashboard. So I want to introduce you now to one of our guest speakers on the webinar, Chief Tom Jenkins. And Chief Jenkins, are you on with us?
Yes, I sure am. I'm on with you.
Excellent. All right. So Chief Jenkins, you all may know him as the Chief of Rogers, Arkansas. He's also the immediate past president of the International Association of Fire Chiefs and has many, many other hats that he wears. But one of those hats is a champion of the NFORS system. So he is one of our power users, and I want him to share with you more about the NFORS system because I'd rather it come from one of your colleagues, your peers, than just hearing it from me. So Chief Jenkins, I'm going to hand over, let's see here, I'm going to hand over the slides to you. And I think you're probably ready for that.
Yep.
Here we go. All right.
Just waiting for the signal. Here we go.
Excellent. Okay, you're up.
All right. All right. Well, first disclosure is besides being an NFORS champion and a power user, I'm also sitting at the airport in Las Vegas on the way to the Fire Rescue Med Conference. So if you hear somebody hitting the jackpot, it's not me, I can assure you. We became an NFORS user because as an accredited agency, department of soon to be about 8 stations, about 140 career people, we needed decision-making tools that make a difference and that are something that we can use not just as a fire chief, but that our battalion chiefs and the various levels of our department can use to look at what our operations side is doing. And so it allows us to make great decisions, and it's been something that we use frequently, we use daily, and it's not used by just those data people within the department. It's used by those people making decisions. On the screen, you can see, a live dashboard of what we look at in Rogers, and that shows, it's a version of a heat map that shows where we have high call volume areas. And of course, you can see this on other analytics, but it is the fact that it's live and that we can slice and dice this data however we want it that makes NFORS very unique and very useful. Diving into the live dashboard for our department, we can start to look at the way we deploy. We have peak volume ambulances. We work a 48-96 shift schedule, and being able to look at not just the quantity of data, but performance, and being able to quickly, through, in most cases, literally one click of the mouse, look at shift by shift performances. Lori mentioned in different city council wards, just becomes invaluable is using a live dashboard that we can customize. We customize one for kind of EMS related calls, and then we have another one that we've customized for fire and more as a catch-all. This is another example of just the live dashboard. Something that, of course, will catch your attention is that, we're all good about collecting NFORS data, but NFORS is about also looking at not just what we found, but what we were originally called for. And deployment, both in concentration and distribution, that's important information. Just because we were called for a fire and found food on the stove, it's nice to be able to look at both sides of those things. You see also an urban and rural breakdown, which for NFPA 1710 time performance is important for us to maintain our accredited status. And like I said, all those windows are customizable. They're popular within the women and men that work for us. They like to see our month-to-month stats, and so we push those out there to help them have some buy-in with the data collection process. This heat map shows us call volume by day of the week, by hour, and this heat map probably, the way it looks probably doesn't do it justice, in that we can quickly say, we just want to see this for medicals, or we want to see this for lift assist, or we want to see this for high priority Delta and Echo level medical emergencies. And so we've actually used this. This is a huge success story to start our first peak volume ambulance just about 18 months ago, that we were able to use NFORS as a vehicle to not just articulate an argument during the budget process for people, but we were able to justify it, and then of course monitor that performance as we go forward. We've adjusted the times that they're available and that sort of thing, and that's incredibly attractive to the decision makers within our department. The NFORS analytic takes it one step further in that, before we were looking at call volume kind of holistically and slice and dice it, but you can actually dive into individual incidents. And so we conduct a very thorough policy-driven after action or post-incident analysis review of, semi-significant incidents. Most of those are house fires, hazardous materials responses. And so you can get in there and look at performance and very detailed information associated with the property that we respond to. So it makes our post-incident analysis or after-action reports, whatever you want to call them, much more data-driven and much more formal than ever before. You can also look at information by unit. And so this is one of our, before that was another city, but this is actually one of our units in the city of Rogers that it shows its call volume and its utilization. And it can do things that I don't know why I find this so interesting, but it tells you whether the unit for a particular time period is getting busier, if it's about, if its call volume is correct or normal for what it typically sees. And so this information is important in a world where we worry about exhaustion of our personnel, especially on a 48-hour, 96 off shift schedule. And so just a lot of information that, like I said, not just our data people have access to, not just our accreditation manager have access to, but those fire chiefs who are out there on the line, making decisions day in and day out. Now, there's a lot of sexy things with NFORS, but by far my favorite and the most popular within the leadership of my department are these daily email summaries. And these daily email summaries, I think, kind of indoctrinate the department into not just performance-based stuff, but they give us real decision-making ability. So this is an email that is generated at the end of our shift. We told them, when our shift exchange was. And for each 24-hour period we work, we get an email that tells us a lot of stuff. Now, this is kind of the top part of the email, and you see circled in red is some information on unit utilization, that we had an ambulance that was utilized for over 360 minutes for the previous 24-hour period and greater than 120 minutes for the overnight time period. And so we're signaling to the shift commander, especially if this is going to be a unit on the back end of a 48-hour shift, we signal to them that these people are ripe for having some exhaustion issues, that they worked, by our metric, they worked quite a bit for an ambulance, and we may not want them to be frontline clinical care providers because they've been used. Below, you also see 2 units that were assigned to a fire incident for greater than 30 minutes, and we use that significance to tell us that they may have gear that needs to be deconned. They have a Nomex hood that may need to be exchanged for a new and clean one. And so in a world of cancer prevention, we're able to use NFORS to signal some need for our shift commander or some supervisor to reach out and make sure they're doing the things that policy already tells them to do to keep themselves safe from the chronic exposure to carcinogens. Deeper down in the email, you get into metrics and numbers that look much more familiar to accredited agencies or soon to be accredited agencies. You see your performance for the particular period. And I think this is fantastic because this is how you actually make change. When we do accreditation reports and we're reporting, 90th percentiles over 5-year periods, it's hard to get excited if you see a bad number or a good number because they end up, it's a year's worth of data most often. Here we're looking at what we did for the previous shift. And so it not only tells us how we're doing in terms of performance from time to time, it also allows us to spot errors that were created in CAD. And so that's important to us, that it's almost a data surveillance tool as much as it is a data performance tool. You can see that we have the performance for both fire and EMS. And then for each unit that caught or run in the previous 24-hour shift, this email tells us what their turnout time was. So not only do we know, overall how we're doing, but we're able to pinpoint the unit that has some issue. You can see if you look down into the Medic one of our ambulances there, you see it has the 90th percentile turnout time of 736 seconds. And I assure Preet, if she's on the line, that's an anomaly, and that would be bad data in there. But we would never catch it if it wasn't for these regular emails that this is how I start my day as the fire chief is combing through what we did the previous time period. So now I'll turn it back over to Lori to close this out.
All right, thank you, Chief. Chief, I'm actually going to take back the presentation because we've got a little time here. I'm going to take them live. Okay. I think we should be able to do some of this. So Chief Jenkins, thank you very much. So you all were able to see some of what he does within his department. What you're looking at right now is live Richmond, Virginia, and what we call their control center. So in their control center, you can see, and they dispatch their NFORS dashboards. They have them customized down to the station level. So as I said to you earlier, you can set up even reader boards with your NFORS data, send in safety tips, yesterday's recap. We link live with weather. So we're going to supplement your data with weather as well. So let me just take you into their dashboard. And this is a new feature that we just added this past week. And so we have so many departments that are doing a lot of different dashboards. And so if you'll just look, we help you to categorize them or put them into different workspace buckets so that you can better organize your dashboards and who gets access, to which dashboards at what level. So we do have this new feature that helps you to do that. So I'll just take so that you can see a little bit. You can see they have multiple dashboards as well. But let's just have a look at their operations dashboard. And that should come up for you. And you'll see immediately that everything is geocoded. And so as we look at their data, one of the features that you can do is select a time frame. So if I wanted, I can just pull up the last 4 hours. And we'll see that they have made 14 calls in the last 4 hours. And we get a lot of heads-up display here right in their dashboard. So I'll select back to 2 years of data. That will auto-populate again. Everything's geocoded. We can search geographically, but you can also create all of your heads-up displays. Everything, again, customizable. So what they have selected may not be what your department selects. So incident count, their event duration. They don't do EMS transport, so it's a little bit shorter for them overall. We link to their AVL data, so we know how far they travel on each incident. Their response count, so very different than their incident count, right? And so when you're talking in a budget meeting or looking at, your accreditation, you need to know this number because that's your resource deployment to handle those incidents, right? They track turnout time. Now, they've got a little problem, but as you can see, but we have a lot of departments that will break this out. You'll have a fire and an EMS turnout, right? So again, you get to customize their response time, and we do calculate on the 90th percentile because that's what's in the industry standards. So if you want something different, we can create that. This is total response time for them. You could break out call processing, turnout, and then have just travel time. So again, you get to customize what you want to see. They also have their water on fire time, command established time, primary search complete time. So these are times that we're grabbing from a timestamp button right off of the CAD. So what they have is, rather than having a dispatcher typing in a lot of canned remarks, they simply have a button that pops up when they're on a fire, and then they can hear these right on the radio and record them. Then I'll just quickly show you a couple of the filtering capabilities. So as Chief Jenkins said, you're going to get unit reports. And so anything you scroll across, and you can see this is busiest unit all the way to the less busier units, right? And the type of calls that they respond to. So here's Engine 5, their EMS, their fires, or fire alarms, I should say, accidents, structure fires, and on and on. But what if I want more information? So let's just, instead of scrolling, I'm going to click on that, and then I'll be able to go up and apply that filter just at the top, and I'll do it the first time. After that, it'll be automatic. And so now I'm just looking at those fires, right, from Engine 5. And so there they are, geocoded. Look at their event duration, much different than the department overall. They do travel shorter distances for these fires than the department overall. Turnout time, a little bit worse, but their response time is better. You're also able to see their water on fire time is better, command established, primary search complete. And so you can drill down by virtually any data element in your dashboard. So anything you want to filter can happen. So I'm just going to scroll down and show you a couple other things that might give you some cool ideas. This is your department response overall. So 67% EMS. There's their accidents, fire alarms. And so if somebody asks you, what's the percentage EMS? Well, you've got it right in front of you, right? We don't have to guess anymore. You'd have it right in your dashboard. Another feature, I'm just going to have time to show you a couple, but this is call volume by first due. So they have selected this into their dashboard. And if you remember, Engine 5 was their busiest first due unit. But if you look, Station 11 actually has the busiest call volume in their first due. So let's just see why. So I clicked on station 11. Let's just go up and have a look. And I always go back to this visualization because if you remember, I think I clicked station 5. Let me go back. I want to show you 11 because show you why the call volume is what it is. There we go. Let's click station 11 and have a look. There we go. So station 11, it's almost 80% EMS, right? So the department overall is only 66%. But you can see exactly where the busier units or where the busier first due units and what's happening with those first due. They also make a lot of fire in that jurisdiction. But there are visualizations where you could actually do what we call a double donut, where you could see which units are responding into 11's territory to help you to understand how often that's happening, where you have a second due that's going in as first due. So there's their battalions. I could filter by battalion. I can filter by shift. This is their city council districts, right? So your data can literally be filtered by anything. We even look at their high frequency responses. So I can have a look here. Let's just see where they've responded. This is 2 years of data. They've responded to this address 462 times. So let's have a look and see what is going on there. So I'm going to move back up here. My little icon is blocked. Give me a second here to move the go to meeting thing. Oh, well, let's move back. There we go. So fire alarms. Most people think, though, it's got to be a nursing home. Well, some of it was EMS, but 346 fire alarms that they responded to in 2 years. It's probably time to talk to someone, right? So we are not sending emergency response resources to that many fire alarms in 2 years. So it helps you to parse out your data to see exactly what is happening in your jurisdiction. So the last thing that I'll show you on the dashboard is that time of day, day of week that Chief Jenkins spoke about. So you can see we've got the days across the bottom. We can see your hours, and you can begin to see peak times, right? So if you knew you needed to deploy additional ambulances, we could even click on these and see in what neighborhood, in what first due, you would need to have these additional resources deployed. So the last thing on the dashboard that I will show you is at the top, we're able to do a word search. So I could actually search the data. Let's do overdose because everybody has issues with opioids in their jurisdiction. So let's just look at what Richmond has in the way of overdoses. So we can search and see. I've had 1,457. Now, it doesn't mean they're all opioids, obviously, but let's have a look because the geocoding has a story too. So right at this address, 43 overdoses there. We've got 31 there, 48 there. So you can begin to see pockets, right, of where you have these situations. I could have searched for arson. I could have searched for, anything, any keyword that you wanted to search your data, and you'd be able to tell those stories. So community paramedic type programs, things like that, that your data can really be assessed to give you a much better indication. So back to their control center, you saw the incident, one of the incident analysis. I want to show you just one other feature, and we'll just pull up an incident so that you can see, and you can see it's live. So they've been responding, it looks like a lot of EMS this morning, a few fire alarms, but we'll just pull up an incident so you can see an incident assessment. So this was an EMS call, a breathing problem, gives you the information on who responded, your dispatch notes, as you saw from Chief Jenkins. And then we're going to have a report card or your benchmarking that can be done on every call. And you can see they hit their benchmarks on this one. So it would give you your performance criteria on every single call. And you get to customize this. They have one where they do want to know if the first due unit was in fact the first due unit, right? So if it was the unit that should have been first due, was that your first due? Because they have a lot of cover units, right, that are going in as first due units. So their alarm processing and answering, turnout time, they are monitoring. And then they are monitoring whether or not it was less than a 4-mile radius for them, because that's helping them understand, again, call volume in certain neighborhoods. And so you have, we're going to geocode it. We're going to give you a lot of other information, your parcel information, the weather. We can bring in live traffic. We're going to give you the disposition of the unit right on the scene and all the things. And it's all live. Everything that, that you scroll across here gives you more analytics on that report card. And the last thing I'll show you is kind of one of my favorites is what else was going on in their jurisdiction. We had 3 other calls at the same time in Battalion 4. So if they had missed some of those benchmarks, or if this had been a fire, it would help you to understand, again, there's system resilience here. What else was happening, and am I still keeping my benchmarks in light of even heavy call volume? So that gives you a little bit of an idea of what's happening with NFORS. And then we have this, the Twitter feature. So we mine your data and write tweets. So if you've got a PIO or somebody who likes to tweet to communicate with the community about what the department's doing, we actually mine that, write tweets for you. We do not send them unless you want that automated. For example, when you respond to a fire, you want that to go out on Twitter, that, you know, use caution, we're responding in this neighborhood kind of thing. We can do that. But otherwise, you can add your own hashtags, your own photos, and tweet right from your data set. So that's a live look. I'm going to take us back now to the data, or excuse me, the slides. So let's talk for our last few minutes here about our exposure app that has now been put in the app stores. There we go. All right, so this is the app, and we've got, and I'll be sending out to you just after this webinar, a link where you can download the brochure and send that out to your department so that everybody can download the app. Encourage them to do so. If your department is connected to NFORS through the analytics that I just showed you, we will also give you an incident access code, that what we call an IAC. If you get that incident access code, it's a 4-digit secure number that you can give your personnel so that they can download incidents right in their phone. They won't have to re-enter the incident information then, like the incident number and the address. So we would download it right into their phone. So we'd love to get you connected for this capability as well. So I'm going to show you just a short video on the app. So let's have a look. So that gives you a little bit of an understanding for those downloading the app. So I think we may have a couple of minutes for questions. So I don't know, Cindy, if you have received any questions during the presentation.
Hi, yeah, there are a few. So let me scroll up to the top. Going way back to almost the beginning, how did you overcome buildings that are on multiple parcels that have different performance scores, an issue we are currently dealing with?
Okay, so good question. So what we're going to do is default to the highest hazard level in that particular parcel. So if you have better data where you have geocoded and we got the hazard level or the risk level with multiple sections or multiple structures on a single parcel. If you've got that, we can help you load that right into your FireCARES page So we're always, we want to help you use your page. And so that's one thing that can happen. But otherwise, we're going to default to the higher hazard level. Okay. Another question, Cindy.
Do you guys operate in Canada?
We do. That's a great question. So yes, the exposure app that I just showed you, it is for the Canadians also. We can also do NFORS connections live. We're working on one in Vancouver right now. We've been in Kingston, Ontario. We're looking at, there's a couple other departments, off the top of my head, I don't recall, but we've got NFORS operations going up there. So yes, you can connect totally to NFORS in Canada. FireCARES, not yet, because we have not been able to identify a national data set for fire. Unfortunately, Canada's fire data is worse than the US fire data. So we've not been able yet to identify a full national data set. We are working on that, and that is something that is still pending. If we can identify some grant funding and also get a standard data set like NFORS in every department there, it would help us to lower that barrier and be able to create FireCARES in Canada. Next question.
Is NFORS using CAD and RMS data to get NFORS info after a call? If using RMS data, is it able to integrate with image trend?
Great question. Yes, we can connect to just your CAD so that you can have these live dashboards. We can also supplement with your RMS data. So virtually we have built NFORS to be able to connect with anything, wherever your data reside. So we can connect with both of those, including RMS. And yes, we have worked with image trend. So we've worked with most of the CAD vendors. I can tell you, if you have emergency reporting, they're a little more challenging because they don't want to give you your data back. But the others have been great at connecting with NFORS, making sure that your data is usable in our dashboards. But yes, we can work with your RMS system. And I should tell you here, NFORS is working on an RMS system. So keep watching. In the next, well, before the end of the year, hopefully, you're going to see some other cool announcements out of the Data Institute.
Okay. Can you use the exposure tracking without an assigned department incident access code? And if so, how?
Yes, anybody can download the exposure app right from the App Store, Apple App Store or Google Play. So it is in both the app stores. We are working with AT&T and FirstNet to make sure it goes into the FirstNet app catalog as well. So you can download it from anywhere. It is free. Start your firefighter career diary right away. Get those exposures tracked. Understand that it is both a physical exposures for cancer purposes and a behavioral health module. So make sure that that you are downloading it and starting it today. US and Canada. It is, as I said, free. You do not have to be connected to a department with that access code. The difference is you will have to enter an incident number and an address so that we know it is a valid response, because that is necessary to show that you had an exposure at an actual event. So it is important that you enter the incident information if you are not connected to a department for an automatic download. Cindy?
Where do they access FireCARES tool?
So FireCARES is at firecares.org, firecares.org. You can go straight to the website, or you can go to the website on your screen, and we have a FireCARES link right from the IPSDI website as well.
Okay. Two people want to know, how much does FireCARES and NFORS cost?
FireCARES is absolutely free. So it is. It has been built for you by the Assistance to Firefighters Grants. We continue to seek grant funding. We have a grant pending now that we're hoping to enter some predictive analytics for you, some machine learning from your data, things like that are going to be really cool features. As far as the cost for NFORS, I'm going to get out of the slides here, Cindy, and pull up another slide really quickly so that they can see the website and also the cost. So bear with me just one second and you will see. All right, so NFORS is a one-time implementation cost. It's $5,000. That includes everything. We're going to connect to CAD. We're going to connect to RMS. build those APIs that are necessary for your data exchange. Then we're also going to get your dashboards built. We're going to build as many as you want, teach you how to build them. We're also going to teach you how to do your accreditation tables. I didn't have time to show you that, but one of the new features we've done is you can auto-populate right from your data, build your accreditation tables. And what may take you months or even years to get your data tables ready for your annual reports or your main accreditation, you can do it in about 15, 20 minutes. So it's pretty awesome to see those data tables coming to fruition, because that's been one of the things that we do, is try to lower that barrier to accreditation. So I didn't get to show you that, but that's one of the new features. And then we're going to put you based on population. After you're all integrated, everybody's on the exposure app. We're going to do all of that for you. Then it's a subscription based on your population. So the lower populations, it's $8,000 a year after that. So we try to keep it at commodity pricing, and that really does just pay for your storage of your data on the Amazon web server. Everything we do is built in the secure cloud environment. Everything is encrypted, and so basically that's what that is for. We don't have grant funding to be able to fund the cost on the cloud. So that's what the subscription is for.
Okay. Do you have a list of departments using NFORS, and something about now that the grant, stating that now the grant is gone, that NFORS is going away? Can you speak to that?
Oh, NFORS is not going away. Okay, so we have a little bit of money left for sustained build out right now, but the subscription that I just showed you, obviously helping with that. We have gotten some private funding as well to build the app. So the app, Exposure app, was actually built with funds from the Ramsey Social Justice Foundation, which is a foundation that really supports public safety. We're also seeking some other projects that will help us to sustain. So no, NFORS is not going anywhere. FireCARES is going to be around. We also have our partner organizations, as you saw. The partners are not going to let these two things go. They're too vital to the fire service community. So the partners, you know, in the event we got in dire strait for any reason, I don't foresee it, or we would not have stood up a new organization. But the partners are not going to let these projects go. So no, that's a rumor.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Think maybe we'll wrap up.
Okay.
So let me just go back to the slides and see if I missed anything. I think that was it. I'm going to give you the contact us, and we'll. I'm going to be sending out a video, by the way, right after this, and an email with some other contact information. My email, of course. So you can reach out to us. Anybody that wants a private demo, we can certainly do that for you as well. With just your department, your chiefs, your techs, we'll be able to do that. So I'm going to just close with one video, very short, and you'll be able to see a little bit more about the Institute. And we look forward to hearing from you guys. Thanks for spending some time with us today. And here's our closing video.
Make cities smarter, but we know we can also make them safer. For the International Public Safety Data Institute, keeping responders and communities safe is job one. That is why the IPSDI and its partners are developing tools to give decision makers the relevant data they need for effective public safety. With the creation of the Community Assessment Response Evaluation System, FireCARES, you get a clear picture into your community's safety. FireCARES identifies hazard and risk levels in your community and your fire department's ability to respond to those risks. By identifying those risk levels, FireCARES reveals critical information for operational and policy decisions. But the IPSDI innovation doesn't stop there. With the launch of the National Fire Operations Reporting System, or NFORS, in your community, you will be able to see the impact of resource deployment decisions on neighborhoods and the citizens you serve. Live interactive dashboards are customized to your community, providing real-time information on daily responses, medical emergencies, fires, disaster response, and even the crisis. When you make a decision, you want and need reliable data. See the possibilities by requesting a video to your fire or law enforcement department and see how the IPSDI and its partners are innovating the front line of public safety.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And Dr. Moore-Merrell, thank you so much. There are a couple of downloads. If you all can see on the right side of your screen, there's a couple of downloads, PDF files that you can take and download now.
Excellent. And we'll send some more links out via the email as well. So thanks, everybody, for staying with us and your attention this afternoon.
Thank you all. Take care.